Hello and welcome to the Anime Monster Review, a video I've been wanting to do for a while. If you watch my 3x3s, it's going to be very similar to that, with a slight different twist on a focus specifically on one anime, and potentially, depending on how well this goes, this will be kind of my format for anime reviews in general, and maybe even manga reviews or whatever else I decide to review in general that's not a 3x3. So more in depth. So if you like videos like this and want to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. Let me know what anime, manga, or whatever I should review next, and if you like the format, what suggestions you would have, that would be great. So without further ado, my criteria for rating this anime, the things I would consider when watching and reviewing this anime: art, character, enjoyment, vibe, and story. I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. Maybe see my 3x3s, I go in more depth, but real quick, art can be the overall backgrounds, animation, characters, character art. Character specifically is more writing and dialogue. The enjoyment factor is just how much I enjoyed watching it in general. The vibe is just the kind of the feeling I got. Like, some shows is a good show and others are like, well, I really don't like it. And then finally is the story. How's the overall story? Pretty self-explanatory. Some of the stats: obviously the name is Monster. The author and studio is first author Naoki Urasawa, and then the studio is Madhouse. Genre is psychological thriller. Episode count is 74, one season, and the status is completed. Premise is a brilliant Japanese neurosurgeon is drawn into darkness when he tries to solve a series of murders involving a patient whose life he once saved. Also, if I didn't mention it, spoiler warnings ahead, because this is a review, but I would recommend go watch it if you haven't, and then after you watch it, come back and see if you agree with me on my takes. Now, what I liked. First, I'm going to explain the overall story. Of course, how can you not like the story of Monster? Basically, how I would describe it is our main character Tenma saves Johan, the main antagonist, and after saving Johan as a child, like 10 years later, Johan comes back and kills a man in front of Tenma and basically frames him for the murders. Now, the reason he does this, I think, is basically to break Tenma's philosophy of all lives are worth saving, whereas Johan does not agree with that. And as a result, Tenma, now on the run, goes on a chase trying to kill Johan, essentially stopping him from continuing this wicked game that he's trying to do. And all throughout, he uncovers Johan's past, people connected to Johan, and Tenma runs into various different people, backgrounds, and experiences, all leading up to the amalgamation of them facing off again and their morals and philosophies clashing. That's kind of how I would explain the overall story. Now, what I really liked was the geography. I found it very fascinating that it was Germany, the Czech Republic, some other European areas around that area. I just found it, at least in the anime, very, very beautiful. How it was drawn and showcased, I found it very fascinating. What I also really liked is just the morals, ethics, and philosophy found throughout the show. I mean, so many different characters with so many different backgrounds that all have different viewpoints in life, obviously. I like how each character was a believable human. I'm going to kind of combine these points. Each character was a very believable human. I guess you could even say with what Tenma was doing, there was no really initial good character. There's lots of moral gray zones, and it explored that. Because, I mean, Tenma is a good man, but he was driven to do a bad thing by hunting down Johan, pretty much by any means necessary. While it's not necessarily all in religious undertones, it more leans on philosophy with nihilism, stoicism, and like stuff like that, if that makes any sense. I also found the voice acting, specifically the Japanese, very, very good with the characters. Each person really had a unique voice, and it wasn't like hearing the same 5 voice actors voice act the same 5 characters in different anime, if that makes sense. Now, what I didn't like the animation overall. I do find it a bit dated, and I think it would use a really nice touch up like Pluto. It would be even more stellar. And the lack of English dub was hard to find. And now this is kind of a pro and con, because it made me sit down and watch a show fully without having it like on a side monitor or something like that. So I will say kind of good and bad. Now, the music also was something I didn't like, except for the opening and then the music that they used to reveal, I think it was every time Johan was on, or like every time he did something, or like when he pointed at his forehead, whatever that specific song motif was, I enjoyed. But I didn't enjoy or really remember anything else. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I recorded the other 3x3s. I apologize. I did not like Carl Newman's character at all. That's this guy. I just found him whiny and boring, and out of all the characters, I just felt like he was the weakest. And then after his whole plot with his father, he was immediately brushed to the sideline. Like, they dedicated, I'd have to say, at least like 5 or 7 episodes to this guy, and he was bland throughout. And then there was no payoff or anything like that. He really just became a silent figure in the background. I also didn't like, maybe gonna make sense or maybe not, I found that throughout the story, maybe it was a purpose in the anime, but Johan's origin and agenda. So what do I mean by that? So there's a pivotal moment at the library where Johan finds the book. Everything behind that, it was kind of like, oh, what's Johan doing? Maybe he's building an organization. Maybe he's repeating Kinderheim. Like, he's running an international banking scheme and stuff like that. Like, he's this very extravagant, like, oh, this is super cool. Like, you know, Johan's mysterious. But then after that, it's kind of like, well, he's trying to become a second Hitler or a political figure, or it's like there's a lot of ors of what Johan could be. And at least a little bit, I found that confusing. And I kind of wish maybe we got from Johan specifically, like what he truly wanted to do, if that makes any sense. And maybe it did, and it just went right over my head. I also have mixed feelings on the ending, which I'm going to explain after this next section. So my favorite characters, Grimmer, all-time favorite character in Monster. I thought I enjoyed seeing him at the beginning of how mysterious he was. Every time he showed up, I knew stuff was going to go down. And I'll talk about it in the next section a little bit, but the Magnificent Steiner concept, phenomenal. At first, I did not enjoy Eva at all, or however you pronounce her name. She was not likable at first in the beginning, but as you see her story progress and her progress as a character, I was actually rooting for her, which I was very surprised by, because initially she's just meant to not be liked at all. But I think she's just, she was a sad alcoholic and she started to turn her life around, and I just liked and respected that. And she did become an enjoyable character for me. Next is Johan. I mean, how can you not like Johan? He's charismatic. He's like an ultimate force to overcome, and like, you don't want him to win, but at the same time, you can't help for rooting for him because he just has that charisma and aura. And then Lunge, or Runge, depending on, I think, translation or whatever. He was a great detective, had an interesting concept with the typing hand, and he was dedicated to his job and he paid for it. And I liked how it showcased that in the anime. Eventually, when he apologizes to Tenma as well, I thought that was like such a pivotal scene, because he was just tracking Tenma this whole time. And then once he truly learned that Johan existed, like, he was dedicated to doing everything he could to help Tenma. And I just found that really cool and respectable. Now, what stuck with me, specifically the episode The Girl in the Seasoned Soldier. And that's the one where the soldier basically murders this girl's mom. It's the guy who teaches Tenma how to shoot initially. And even despite that, he takes care of the girl and is committed to taking care of this girl. And just the regret and sorrow he has, I thought was so impactful that it just truly stuck out with me. I was moved by that episode. Even talking about it is like, oh, a little emotional, but I just felt like with Monster in its whole, it took concepts like war or like violence, the extremes of it, and then what happens afterwards, where it's normally oh, well, in an anime maybe you just kill someone and then that's that. But no, there's still families left behind, there's still regret left behind, there's still much. And I feel like not a lot of other animes talk about that, and that's why that stuck with me. Another thing that stuck with me is an episode specifically where I think Nina was working at a restaurant and she found out her boss, the restaurant owner, used to be a hitman, and then he had quit. And what made him quit was just seeing a man take simple pleasure in 5 cups of sugar or 5 scoops of sugar, whereas he, as a hitman, never enjoyed any pleasures in life until he tried that, and then he couldn't kill anybody anymore. And I thought that was also impactful. Next would be the character of Dieter in general, the child that follows around Tenma, an abused boy who basically had all the cards stacked against him to hate life and to not find any joy or beauty in it. But because of his interaction with Tenma, he became a beacon of hope for characters around him and continued to give inspiration and do the right thing and prove that even with the cards you're dealt, you can still, as long as you can control yourself, make the most out of any situation, and you're not bound by your circumstances. You choose who you want to be. And then like his interaction with that child who was turning into the next Johann is a great example. Like I mentioned with Grimmer before, the concept of the Magnificent Steiner. Sometimes I feel like I personally have a hard time articulating my emotions or expressing them, which is why I kind of enjoyed Grimmer as a character and related to him. But then it was the concept of, I guess, in times of stress, being able to flip a switch and, let's say, doing things that you need to do or overcome horrible situations or circumstances and then being able to do it. I thought that was really fascinating, and it wasn't done in a cool, haha, edgy way where he's like just killing everyone. I don't think they showed a single time when he was the Magnificent Steiner. Maybe, I could be wrong. But it was always like a room full of bodies after he showed up. But the thing that stuck out to me the most, again, spoiler warning if you haven't watched it, is his death when he raided that building and then Tenma asked, well, did the Magnificent Steiner show up? And Grimmer was like, no, this one was me. I just thought that was, again, truly moving, and it stuck with me, hence this category, right? So the last section, or the last point, is Johann's talk with the orphan when he was disguised as Nina, basically asking the boy why his mother abandoned him, if he was truly loved, and then the messed up thing that he did, where sending the orphan to basically the red light district and experiencing all that. I thought it was just a very sad blip into Johann's mind and maybe what he was forcing onto other people, what he thought he experienced essentially, or a form of what he experienced, and just the twisted nature in that. And then another is the picture with the alcohol scene. I will say it was kind of hyped up to be a little more iconic than it was, where the guy who died, it wasn't even that big of a deal to the story. So, but it did, I was looking for this scene for like the longest time. I'm like, when is it going to happen? When's the payoff? And while still good, it wasn't as good as I thought it would be, maybe because I was spoiled for it. Now, what also stuck with me is that, again, kind of like I said with Eva, is that there is character growth all around, again, with Dieter as an example as well, where characters weren't stagnant and each changed with the circumstances and the things that they faced throughout. And ultimately, at the end of the series, Tenma did stick to his morals and he didn't kill anybody, which I did find surprising and powerful in its own way. Some other things that stuck out to me was the lawyer, the guy who basically his father was a spy and he denied it the whole time. His father could never be a spy. And then when he found out his father was a spy, how he kept kind of trying to clear his family name. I thought that was powerful. The bodyguard who protected Eva, he hated dealing with women, but at the end he ended up falling in love with her and then wanted her protection. I thought that was sweet. And then the criminal psychologist, the guy who cheated in school, Tenma's college mate, how he was just talking to different criminals, and then I guess how he felt bad for cheating after all these years, and then he kind of found himself as a fraud and then kind of came into his own, I guess, if that's how you can explain it. Oh, my bad. So the hitman was the guy who originally killed, I think, Nina's latest foster parents, and then he felt bad about it, and he had his own wife and kids at the time, and he was trying to make a better life with the money he had, and then he ultimately died by Roberto. But again, it's people doing bad things and then trying to be good. I'm not saying I'm excusing murder or anything like that, but you can't help but sympathize with certain characters when, yeah, I did this one bad thing, I guess maybe initially for the good of myself, but now I got a family and kids and that life's behind me and I'm just trying to be better now. Again, not excusing it, but you know. And then finally, Roberto as a character in general, I thought was very interesting, not interesting enough to put in the list, but he was a guy very similar to Johann, and he thought basically he was Johann's right-hand man and worshipped the ground he walked on. But ultimately, Johann just used and abused him for everything that he was worth. And at the end, he couldn't see what he wanted to see the most, which was Johan's paradise, essentially. And then kind of with the hitman point is that people do bad things but can still be good. Soldier who killed the mom, trying to make it right by raising the daughter. The hitman or the assassin who's very similar to Tenma, who brought in, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was into his country, which led to a bunch of bad stuff. And then he ultimately died trying to assassinate the problem basically that he made. Or, I mean, there's so many examples. Aba, or basically lying about Tenma and then trying to make it right. Again, so many characters do bad things, but still try to be good. And then ultimately the concept is that we all have a monster, or the monster itself that everybody has. It shows up in different ways, of course, but it's still true that everyone's capable of becoming Johan or becoming Tenma or doing bad things or doing good things. But there is evil inside of all of us, and it's how we try to, I guess, quell that beast, if you will, or that monster, to be able to be a good person and do good things, if that makes any sense at all. Now the ending, I wanted to create a specific section talking about the ending. Now what I liked, who shot Johan specifically? It wasn't Tenma, it was a random drunk that Johan tried to use as a puzzle piece, and it ultimately ended up biting him when he used this drunk's son to threaten Tenma. I thought that was beautiful, that Johan is this guy who plans everything and he couldn't plan fate at the end of the day. All right, had to let out the dogs. I'm not putting back on my hoodie, it's hot. So you get a special get over it. Now the final piece of the puzzle. What do I mean by that? I mean specifically Johan asking Tenma whose mother loved more. Was it a mistake that she gestured for Nina over him? Or no, that she volunteered to give him away and not Nina. And I thought that was also very powerful, very iconic, very cool. I was amazed by that. I also thought it was amazing that Tenma did save Johan. Again, talk about sticking to his values and everything like that. And it was kind of open-ended if Johan is alive or not. I guess there's a continuation, which I haven't read or anything like that. Tenma performs a surgery and he works on Johan despite everything that they've been through, which is also just very, very powerful and interesting. Like I mentioned before as well with Lunger, or however you pronounce his name, he did apologize to Tenma and reconnect with his family. I thought that was nice and sweet overall. And that he was able to see his granddaughter, which was also very cool, after like he was working on the Tenma case for 10-15 years or something like that. And again, to apologize and say, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, even though I'm notorious for being right. Very, very powerful. And I think relatively it is safe to say everyone did get a happy ending. Tenma, instead of working at a hospital, is working at Doctors Without Borders or whatever. A lot of the side characters that you see have relatively happy lives. Dieter's growing up, going to school. Nina's going to school, gonna be a lawyer and stuff like that. I mean, almost everyone got a happy ending, so I did enjoy that. What I didn't like is how it kind of turned into Johan's glorified suicide, where he was trying to get Tenma to kill him. I think that the ending maybe was rushed a little bit in both the anime and the manga. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind of how it felt, reaching the final city, how Johan wanted everyone to kill each other in the Rose Mansion, and then how he wanted to kill himself. That just doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but again, I could be wrong and it could have gone over my head. And that's kind of what I mean by the true goal or his conclusion. It wasn't to rule the world, it wasn't to recreate Kinderheim, it was just to kill himself, which doesn't make, again, it doesn't make too much sense to me, but I could really just miss it. And then that kind of goes into, well, is he a product of military experiments? I don't know. There were lots of moving parts with Kinderheim, with the organization, with the baby, and trying to recruit Johan and make him a second Hitler. And I just kind of found all that, I wish it was explained a bit more. I wish that part was, that loose end was kind of cleaned up and tightened up. Again, which is what I was saying, that it seemed a tad bit rushed. But then again, I could be wrong. He did write Pluto and he did write 21st Century Boys, which I haven't, but that is going to be one of the next manga I read within like the next 10 or 15, which is saying a lot because I'm going to be reading manga soon. So stay tuned for that. And then the last thing is that, which is why I have the image that I do, is Nina under hypnosis is never expanded upon. She was trying to choke out the criminal psychologist, and she almost seemed like a worse monster than Johan. Again, I could be completely wrong, and it could be because she's also a product of the experiments and stuff like that. But I kind of thought like, oh, well, that just happened, but it was never continued. It was never explored or anything. And I thought that was just a really weird thing to add. Maybe it was showcasing that they were siblings and that they both had the tendency, or again, everyone has a monster in them. I don't know. But I found that fascinating, and I wish it explored it more. In conclusion, yes, I would highly recommend. Like I mentioned in my 3x3, it's one of the 3 anime that I would recommend out of those. Again, stellar story, great philosophy, great morals, great ethics. Animation is a little so-so, voice acting is great. But I would score this a 10 out of 10. I would watch this again, no problem. I wish I watched it earlier in my life, but I'm glad I watched it at this point as well. I thought it was very, 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 very good, as you guys can tell, because I'm making a whole video about it. But I guess I will be making videos probably if I take your guys' recommendations. I'll say if it's a 1 out of 1. I have no problem doing that. And you guys might think it's silly, but I think Monster deserves the acclaim that it gets and the recognition and praise that it does. But with that being said, let me know what you guys think. Do you like this style of content? Do you like this review? Do you agree with it? Do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to take away? Let me know. What anime or manga or whatever would you recommend next? Also follow my socials and stuff like that too. But thank you for watching. I've been Boog the Goob. May God bless you and peace.